everything offline?
The radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show this Saturday night. Hope everybody's having a good time. Good weekend, anyway. All right, we've got a bunch of stuff to talk about today on the show. Sorry I'm a few minutes late, but we can get started right off the bat. All right, we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about this fully automated luxury communism. Somebody told me about this in the chat a few weeks ago, I guess, or a few shows ago. So I looked it up, and okay, it explains a lot. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk a little bit about why that is so nutty and absurd, what it is that they're getting wrong, why it's so attractive to so many people today. Again, this seems to be coming up on the left and among young people over and over and over again. Remember. We'll also talk about a survey that was taken among, I'm not sure exactly the number of people, but a large kind of a cross-section of Americans, young, old, middle, a variety of different income groups, and also a variety of different self-identified races, I guess, and about inequality, about equity, about the American dream, opportunity, and I thought the results were really interesting. Actually, shockingly not depressing. So maybe a little bit of optimism on that front. And of course, I am available to take questions from you. So feel free to chip in with any questions you might have. David has already got us started. I see that Dave Goodman, Dave has already got his Saving Private Ryan question in. So remember, I don't see Ali here. Ali might not be here this Saturday night, but our goal is still $600. So please feel free to use the super chat to support the show. Value for value, all that stuff. Don't forget to like the show before you leave. We've already got our nominal person who's disliked the show before it even started. So we know there's a lot of objectivity going on there. They make the effort to come all the way to my channel just to press the dislike. Just maybe if I start commenting on it, stop commenting on it, I'll stop doing it. Maybe they're just doing it to gain my attention, but that's pretty pathetic, don't you think? All right, so we've got those are going to be the topics. We've got that. There might be a few other things that we can talk about if you guys don't have questions. But yeah, I don't know. I was going to talk about this as well. All right, we'll see. We're going to talk about the politics of fear, but we'll see. Maybe the title was too long. We'll see if you guys have questions or whether we have time for that. All right. Before we jump in, I guess this communism, this fully automated luxury communism, reminds me of the fact that I've got a debate coming up. I just want to remind you, just in case you want to come, just in case you're close by, nearby, somewhere. It's at the University of Pennsylvania, October 12th, with Wolf, and he's a real piece of work, a real socialist. It should be a lot of fun. It's done by the student union, So kind of a neutral entity. It's not like libertarians or the socialists. It's kind of so my expectation is there'll be a lot of students there. It'll be a relatively big event, but it is open to the public, so you are all welcome. So please, if you live in the area, or if it's not too big of a drive or too bad of a drive for you, then come on over. Just look it up. Yaron, Brook, Richard Wolff debate, University of Pennsylvania. It's on Google. I did post it on Facebook. I have tweeted it. I'll tweet it again probably tomorrow with the information of how to sign up and how to register in advance to attend. But hopefully you guys can be there. It'll be nice. I have a feeling that most of the students there will be on Wolff's side. I mean, he is, I think, the better known of the two of us, and will attract, I'm sure, a large audience and a large following. So it'd be great if some of you guys came by, said hello, and showed some support. And it should be a fun event. So very cool. All right, let's jump right in. Fully automated luxury communism. So the idea here is to basically accelerate the coming of the Marxist utopia. So in Marx's utopia, which he never quite explains how we get there, he never quite explains how it works, he never quite explains what it's going to take to achieve. In this utopia, in the future, we all can do what we want to do. So you find Marxists that say, no, we are true believers in happiness. We want to reach, we're striving to the day when, when we can be truly happy. And that means doing whatever the hell we want without worry about working or anything like that, right? So, oops, let me just do that. So it's the idea that all your material needs, all your material desires are instantly met. It all just arrives. It's all just there. No effort is required. No work is required, unless you want to work. So you can work if you want to, only doing the work that you want to do. And your material being, your material stuff is taken care of, whether you are working or not, whether you want to work or not. So you can pursue your hobbies, you can sit at the beach all day, you can read books, you can listen to music, you can engage in learning the violin, you can do anything you want. And your basic needs are taken care of. So you don't have to worry about it. And everybody's like that. As David said, it sounds like Star Trek. And yes, there is a sense in which I have learned from you guys, I think, that Star Trek is very much like this. That is, you do whatever you want. You can join the fleet, you can go into space, you can leave, but your material well-being is always taken care of, because it's costless to take care of your material well-being. It's costless to feed you, to clothe you. It's costless to supply you with a home, a yacht, a vacation. Whatever you want is costless and is available. Now, the update, Keynes actually identified this in the 1930s. Keynes, this is Keynes the economist, he wrote that we are going to reach such a level of wealth, such a level of prosperity. We will be making so much money, if you will, per hour, that you won't have to work very much. Oh God, how do I shut this off? Yeah, I'm trying to shut off the message, the beam from the messages that are arriving on my computer, but I'm not sure how to do that exactly. Let me see. Maybe if I, yeah. All right. We got bing, bing, bing. Yeah, I'm not sure how to putz with the sound from the computer. How do I do, wait a minute. If I do notifications, I have to go to notifications somewhere. Sorry, guys. It's annoying. There's notifications. Yeah. No. Do not disturb now. All right. All right, I think that'll do it. We'll see in a minute. All right, so Keynes said, you'll make so much money, you'll be able to work part-time, you'll be able to spend a lot more time on vacations, on the beach, and all this other stuff, and you'll make so much money from the little you work because standard of living will be so high that everything, life will become mainly composed of leisure activities and hobbies. Now, this fully automated luxury communism takes it one step above. It says, well, we know today that soon we will be able to have robots produce everything. They'll be able to make everything. Star Trek, right? And we'll be so rich, so wealthy, that the computers will produce it all, and you won't have to do anything. You'll be able to achieve and attain anything that you want just out of whim. Whatever you whim, you will be able to get. You'll have everything. Robots will produce everything. And just like in Star Trek, if you want a gourmet meal, you'll press a button and boom, it'll come out of nowhere. It'll just produce itself. The machine will reorganize the atoms and give you the meal that you desire with the flavors that you desire without anybody actually having to do any work. Now this, of course, on many levels, is complete fantasy. It is utopian in a sense of unattainable and unachievable. It's also utopian, dystopian, in a sense that I don't think that anybody wants to achieve it. Anybody would want to actually attain it. It assumes that work is suffering, work is pain, work is drudgery. Now, it is true that we are going to reach a point where work will not be those things. It is true that robots are going to replace the drudgery, the physical labor, the things that we don't like and don't want to do. Indeed, robots have already done much of that. Computers have done much of that. We have automated machines that do so much of what people used to do through physical labor. So we've already moved quite a bit into the future. We have computers, we have robots, we have calculators, we have all these mechanisms by which we can attain at a relatively low cost relative to the past, an amazing standard of living without engaging in much physical labor. Now, there's still some physical labor we have to engage in. David mentions house cleaning, for example. And yes, today I was organizing my books and wow, that's a lot of physical labor. But the idea is even that will go away because you'll have a robot that cleans the house. I can imagine, within the next 100 years, you will definitely have a robot that cleans your house, maybe much, much sooner. I'm sure much, much sooner than 100 years. I just don't know when. And more of what we do will be replaced by machines and by robots, particularly those things that are easily to repeat, those things that are easy to mimic, those things that are easy to program, and certainly those things that engage physical activity. So work of drudgery, work that's repetitive, work that's boring, and some work that's interesting is going indeed to go away. Other work will appear. We don't know what, and this is what people are missing. What they're missing is basically two things. One is, even the robots need fixing. The robots need designing. The robots need producing. The idea that robots fix robots and robots produce robots ad infinitum is absurd and ridiculous. Human beings have to be engaged in the process. So somebody's going to have to do the work, and I guess we all live off of the people who do that work. And of course, the idea is, I guess, that they only do the work if they like it and if they want to do the work. And by that standard, if there are not enough people, then the work doesn't get done. It's just, a bizarre idea that you could imagine that everything is just created, produced. You don't need. And everybody is motivated to produce the things that you need. So even in a Star Trek world, right? I remember when Star Trek goes to dock, there are people the mechanics who come up and fix it, and they do that work. And the idea is they do that work because they like doing the work, because they enjoy doing the work. They don't do it for the money. What about the people who are better at it than other people? What is the incentive structure there? This cook or the guy who runs the shipyard, who runs the whole project of fixing the spaceships, does he get paid more? I guess not. Nobody gets paid. There's no money. So what's in it for him? Is he just working? He's working for nothing. What's the motivation? What's the incentives? Some innovation might happen anyway, but unlikely. What if people start trading? What if people start bartering? Is that going to be illegal? Is that going to be, you're going to be put in jail for that? So the way it actually works, how it actually works, who does what the incentives are, what the motivations are. There's no answer to those. They haven't thought them through. They don't actually work them through. Now, there's a whole book on fully automated luxury communism. I haven't read the whole book. I read the Atlantic article describing it. But just logically, they haven't thought. Well, the love of work, so what if the incentive is the love of work? Sure, but what if there's just not enough mechanics? None of people love to do the mechanical work. What happens to those? What happens then to the work that needs to be done? Does it just not get done? So, yeah, some people will love their work. Those people go to work and do the work. But whether they go to work one day or they don't go to work one day, doesn't matter. Nobody's going to dock their pay. There are no bosses, I guess. It's basically, what they really hold philosophically is a kind of technological determinism, a progress determinism. Things just happen. Progress just happens. Innovation just happens. Technology advances. It just happens. If Steve Jobs doesn't do it, somebody else will do it. If they're paid or not, it just happens. But what if it doesn't? And what if somebody wants to trade for the innovation that they discovered? What if somebody discovers something and he doesn't want to give it away? He goes to jail, I guess. Force gets applied to him. So it's just fantasy in that sense. It's fantasy in terms of where stuff comes from. They have no sense, and you saw this with Vosh when I talked to Vosh, they have no sense of production, of the effort required. They have no sense of the role of the human mind, of organization of labor, organization of production. They have no sense of how the stuff that you need get to where you need it. Right now, we're talking about supply chain bottlenecks. Well, how do you prevent supply chain bottlenecks when there are no prices? We don't know what people desire and what they don't desire, except they desire it. But how much they desire it? They desire it at 10 or they desire it at 50? There is no way to allocate resources. The robots can't allocate. And, you know, it goes back to Hayek's knowledge problem. The robots don't actually know what I want. The only way industrialists know what I want is because I buy it. And by putting a dollar amount to it, I send them a signal about whether and how much I value it. Markets are driven by chains of supply and demand, by prices, by the signal, the information that prices convey to the rest of the market. How do you know how much soap to make in a market that doesn't actually have a price on soap? But if it was one kind of soap, I mean, we saw in the Soviet Union, even that one kind of soap was either overproduced or underproduced because there's no price. There's no sense of supply and demand. But what if I want a particular type of soap? Who's going to make it? The robots. How much of the soap are they going to make? How do they know? So there's no way for an economy like that to actually run. And we learned that. In the Soviet Union, we learned it in China, we learned it every time stuff is socialized. Once you take away the price mechanism, once you take away supply and demand with prices, once you take away markets, the whole supply chain breaks down. Right? So it's impossible to put into place. It just can't work. We'll talk about the motivation for it in a second. But there's another aspect of this that is just wrong, misapplied, just a lack of understanding of human nature. What does it mean that all our desires and all our wants are taken care of? I don't know what I'm going to want. There is no base level for my desires and wants. What does it mean when people say all their needs are taken care of? What are your needs? I need more stuff every year. I need different things in a year. I need to discover the things that I want and the things that I need. I don't settle. the robot are making food of X quality. I want X plus 1. I can't remember, but isn't it true that in Star Trek, some people had like space yachts, private space yachts? Why not? Can everybody get one? Is it truly costless? Is the raw material costless? Is the electricity costless? But there's no end to human desires, human wants, human needs. There's no end to the potential of progress to supply those. But where does the progress come from? If not from somebody's mind, somebody coming up with an idea of a new type of soap with a new kind of scent, I don't know, new kind of food. So we don't just desire to have the standard of living that we have, the quality of life that we have. We don't just, this fully automated luxury communism is set in, everybody would go on vacation at the lake and everybody would do. But what if somebody wants to go to Mars? How are they going to go to Mars? Well, somebody's going to have to make massive investments in going to Mars. How? Who? What's the incentive? How are they going to get engineers to come and work on their project rather than other projects? So the whole conception here is that values are static, that values are given, and that values are known from the top down. There is an authoritarian, a robot, a computer that knows what you need, what you want, what you desire, what your values are. And it provides them to you. But what if my values change? And to what extent are my values as meaningful if no effort is required to attain them? They just show up. What about the value of work? The value of work not only because it can be enjoyable, but because it's a challenge, because that's where we get our self-esteem. Now, theoretically, you could take your hobby into that, but how do you know you're any good? Isn't the price system another way in telling you you are successful, you are good at what you do, you are producing values, real values to other people? So it rejects where values come from your mind, your choices, your life. It rejects the idea that values are constantly changing, growing, becoming more ambitious. And it rejects the whole way in which production happens, which is somebody has an idea and has to muster the resources to make that idea reality. Robots don't have ideas unless they become human. And then they're human, not robots. So they're conscious, not robots. So yes, I think we will achieve a day where all of our basic material needs, all of our manual labor will be achieved easily, cheaply, dirt cheaply by robots. Think about this. I think I did this exercise before, but imagine we could grow the economy at 5% a year for the next 40 years. And imagine you earn, I don't know, let's say $10 an hour today. So you're at the bottom, right? You're struggling. $10 an hour. And assume, which I think is justifiable to assume, that your wages are tied to the growth rate in our economy. Then that $10 an hour in 40 years, you would earn in real terms, assuming the 5% growth is real, you would earn $72, I think, dollars an hour. $10 turns into $72 an hour. Now, with $72 an hour, you can live pretty well. $72 an hour is a pretty good wage. And we're talking about the poorest people in our society making $72 an hour in real terms. If that happens, there is no poverty. If that happens, everybody gets their basic needs taken care of. More than their basic needs. More than their basic needs. But of course, the only way that can happen is if we embrace capitalism. The only way that can happen is if we keep money, if we price things, if we use the price system, if we have free markets. Then we get to the point where there are no poor people, by any standard. And where we, middle class, are all millionaires, very young, and can do whatever we want, including working less, if that's what we want to do. So it's very quickly, you can see that the real solution to attaining this kind of lifestyle, where you work a little and you play a lot, if that's what you want, is to embrace capitalism. It's the only way. Because indeed, if you take all the wealth in the world today and you divide it among all the people on planet Earth today, it doesn't raise their standard of living that much for very long. And you take away the incentive to create much more wealth. Communism only leads in one direction. Communism only leads to more poverty. Communism only leads to more destruction. Communism only leads, even if it's utopian, even if it has no dictator, but it has to have a dictator. Somebody has to put those evil capitalists in jail. It only leads to death, destruction, and starvation. It does not lead to luxury. Luxury is a feature of, only a feature of capitalism. There is no such thing as luxury communism. Luxury communism is completely, unequivocally a contradiction in terms. Communism cannot produce luxury. It will never produce luxury. The robots will break down. Nobody will be available to fix them. Nobody will know how to fix them. Nobody would have studied how to fix them. Everybody will be doing their thing. And civilization will collapse, wealth will collapse until they rediscover capitalism. I mean, it's not that hard. It's not that hard. All right. All right, so one more point I want to make about this, just to link it to something I've told you about many, many times. This idea really comes out of Judaism and Christianity. This really is the idea of the Garden of Eden. It's the Garden of Eden mythology. It's the Garden of Eden that has conditioned people to think in this way, or the Garden of Eden is a projection of people's desires. The desire to get the unearned. The desire to live a life without effort. The desire to just be at the beach, do whatever your whims desire, without the need to produce the things that are required for your life. In the Garden of Eden, all food is just there. No effort, no work is required. No struggle. The Garden of Eden requires nothing of man. Indeed, the Garden of Eden is man as animal, is man with no reason, is man with no will, is man with no choices. What everybody wants is to reverse the fall of Adam and Eve, to return, what these guys want, not everybody, to return to some garden, mythological Garden of Eden, where they don't need to use their mind. In other words, they don't need to be human. What they want to do is become animals. What they want to do is become beasts of the land with no free will, no choice, no effort, no work, numb, dead. And of course, in the Garden of Eden, you live forever. Boring as life might be. And this is a pervasive mythology and super destructive. Of course, it's not just the Garden of Eden. It's, of course, paradise. It's, of course, where you go when you die, if you're good. It's a world with no work. It's a world with no money. It's a world with no effort. It's a world where you sit around doing what? Nothing. It's a world where you return to being an animal. And it seems like Christianity hit a home run with taking the Garden of Eden and projecting it into the future, projecting into the afterlife. It's very appealing in Christian mythology. It's very appealing to people, and you see it circled back. You see it recycled, if you will, by the communists. What is the fully automated luxury communism, if not Garden of Eden or paradise? But a false Garden of Eden and a false paradise. Remember that Eve has to bite from the apple of knowledge. The apple of knowledge is what gives Adam and Eve human consciousness. The apple of knowledge gives Adam and Eve reason, free will, choices. It makes them human. And that is viewed as a fall. That is viewed as a bad thing. That is viewed as something we need to overcome with communism. All right. So yeah, it's also, something that it's, again, to link this to kind of a floating, platonic, wishful thinking. People imagine a world that's completely unrealistic and unattainable. It goes back to those platonic roots that we've talked about over and over again during these episodes. Our job, the way to combat this, is to recognize that life is amazing, that life is not a burden, as Jordan Peterson would tell us, but life is amazing, particularly in a modern world. Embrace your will, embrace your reason, embrace your work, embrace your life, live. The antidote to luxury communism is to say, no, I want to work, I want to produce, and I want to trade with my fellow man. I want better, better and better and better all the time. My wants are not constrained. They're not limited. We need a positive vision of the fall. Becoming human makes happiness possible, makes self-esteem possible, makes success possible, makes interesting, stimulating, challenging stuff possible, makes pleasure possible. We'll talk about pleasure tomorrow in the Yaron Rules for Life. So we'll do that tomorrow. All right, that is my take on fully automated luxury communism, the insanity that is. We have a lot of Super Chat questions, quite a few, $20 or more, so thank you to all of you. I haven't kept track of how much money we've raised, so I don't know. I'm sure we're short, quite a bit short of our $600 goal, but I'm going to jump in with these based on the dollar amount associated with them. I'll answer all the $20 and above questions now. Then we'll talk about the survey on Americans' inequality and equity. And after that, we'll take some more questions. So feel free to jump in with more Super Chat questions as we move along. And the ones that you ask now for $20 or more, I'll answer before we get to the next topic. All right, let's see. James, $100. Thank you, James. That is impressive. Really, really appreciate it. It's support like that that makes this show possible. Of the no-income tax states, Arkansas, Florida, Nevada, South Dakota, Texas, Washington, Wyoming, Tennessee, how do you rank them on growth and economics? I'm comparing culture, food, health, and wealth, and evaluating the values of each one. Do you think the politics will become impossible to escape in any of them? I mean, it's interesting that Washington, which has no income tax, is dominated by Democrats. It's a Democratic state. The rest are mostly Republican, although Nevada has tilted Democratic. Nevada's tilted Democratic. How do you rank them? It's impossible to rank them because it really depends on what you value. This is where central planning doesn't work, and even central planning by Yaron, by me, doesn't work. What do you value? I didn't know Arkansas was a no income tax state. Huh. Right. So what do you value? Low cost of living? Well, then Arkansas, Tennessee, Wyoming, South Dakota, Nevada, depending on where Nevada, Florida, Texas. I mean, that's the ranking, right? Probably. I mean, I don't have the stats with me, but Arkansas, Tennessee, Wyoming South Dakota are probably cheaper than even Texas and Florida. Again, depending on where in Texas and Florida. Food, or let's call it civilization, culture. Well, you'd probably rank Texas and Florida at the top there, particularly Florida if you're talking about Miami, and Texas if you're talking about Dallas or Austin or Houston or even San Antonio. Great food, lots of culture, good hospitals. So Texas, Florida would be at the top. Tennessee and Washington, of course. Washington, Seattle has great food, great culture, great hospitals, a lot of wealth. But of course, Alaska. AK is Alaska. All right, that makes more sense. So you can write off Alaska right off the top because it's too cold, right? You can't live in Alaska. Like maybe with climate change, it'll get better, but it's not. I mean, even I know like Jennifer likes Michigan, but like Alaska's over the top, right? That's just too much. Florida, hot and humid, flat and boring. Miami's nice, lots of culture, a lot of good food, health, wealth. Nevada, hot, really hot in the summers, quite cold in the winters. Vegas can get very cold, and certainly Reno can. Not a lot of culture, good food in Vegas, but you have to deal with the tourists and all of that. So mixed, I'd say. Nevada is mixed. It's terrible outside of Vegas, but Vegas is a city, so it has some stuff. South Dakota, I don't know. It's cold. There's nothing there. There's no culture, there's no food, there's no health, there's no wealth. Texas. South Dakota is pretty. Parts of it are just boring. Texas, huge state, lots of options, got real problems, quite religious, bad abortion law, bad law in general, relatively highly regulated as compared to Florida, let's say, which is a lot less regulated. But great culture, great food, great health, great wealth. WA is Washington. Washington, everything's good, but it's very expensive to live in Seattle, very expensive, and you have to deal with socialists everywhere, not maybe through income tax, but everything else. The socialists run the place. But a great, beautiful, one of the most beautiful places in the world when it's not raining, which is like 2 months out of the year. Wyoming, beautiful, pretty, cheap to live. If you're in Jackson Hole, great food. I don't know about culture. Some good culture, depending on the time of year. Very cold in the winter. God, is it cold there in the winter. Tennessee. Tennessee's a good state. Memphis and particularly Nashville, growing cities, lots of culture, music, all kinds, good food, great hospitals, a lot of wealth, a lot of jobs. Tennessee would rank high in my list. I don't know. That's my sense. I don't know if you want any more detail than that. But it really depends on your values. Do you care about cold? Do you want to be hot? Tennessee, the weather's good too. It's like neither cold nor hot. It's like somewhere in between. Yeah, Tennessee of these states is one of the best. All right, we've got a $50 question from Alex. A lot of high value questions, but they've all dried up. They've all stopped suddenly. It seems that the replicators in Star Trek create something from nothing. Well, they rearrange the atoms. You get output from no inputs, like a perpetual motion machine. If that were the case, metaphysics as we know it would be different. No causal chain of production. Imagine a technology that could take atoms and reconfiguring them into anything you wanted. Well, I think that has massive implications to everything, far beyond just the economics. Look, one could argue that we could reach a point, I don't know, if we could manipulate the physical world to that extent, that a lot of what we think we know about economics would be null and void. But we're hundreds of years before that. And I don't think Star Trek quite has it. Otherwise, why can't they use the machine to just rearrange the atoms of the people they don't like? Think about their transporter. The transporter also rearranges you. I wonder if they can replicate human beings. Science fiction is filled with contradictions, and so is Star Trek. So yes, real problematic. Okay, Corey from Australia. Let's say we kept the economic conditions of the 20th century. Would we not be at least close to this utopia minus the lack of work? Would life not become so much easier and work that less physical and therefore more enjoyable to the majority? So I assume what you're saying is, if we kept economic conditions in the 19th century, you mean laissez-faire capitalism. Would we not be at least close to this utopia? Well, no. Because the fact is that your wants would change. That is, you would work hard in order to get the private spaceship that will take you close to the speed of light to a vacation on Venus. So today we work hard to get our iPhones. There we will work hard to get the spaceship and vacation in Venus. Or today you want a vacation in Cabo San Luca, then you'd go to, I don't know, whatever, right? So life is already like that. How much of your income today, particularly if you don't live on the coasts, how much of your income today, what percentage of your income? Let's say you're upper middle class. Let's say you got a good job. Let's say you're making $250,000 a year, $250,000 a year. Let's even say it's net of taxes. That's a lot of money, I know. But let's say you're making that money. What fraction of that is going to food? Basic food. We're not talking about 3-star Michelin restaurants. What percentage of that is going to housing? Very small. Very small. You indeed have a huge amount of money with which to buy stuff. But the stuff we buy is expensive because we want expensive stuff. Like some people like Louis Vuitton bags for $20,000. I don't get it. My wife doesn't get it. But people enjoy that. This is where personal values are personal values. And so we spend a massive amount of our income today on stuff that was unimaginable in the 19th century. To live at the standard of living of the 19th century, what was it, 10% of your income? And even then, it's much higher than the 19th century because you're running water and you have electricity and you have all of that. Right? So it's the growing wants and the growing availability because of the profit motive, because of capitalism, because of production, because of innovation, because of entrepreneurship and ingenuity. It's constant. It never stops. It never, ever stops. All right, let's see. Oh, Wes, we have another $50 question. Wes has it. I just discovered the Romantic Manifesto is finally available on the Kindle. Reading it for the first time. Or you're not reading it. I assume you're... Oh, and the Kindle. You are reading it then. Yes. The effort is to make sure everything is available on the Kindle and everything is available in audio ultimately. But so I'm really, really glad that you could do that. And thank you. That's very generous. And you're not even asking me a question. So that is incredibly generous. Thank you. All right. Let's see. We have a bunch of $20 questions. So let's do some $20 questions. And then we'll go on to the second topic. David asks, this was the first question up. It was up before the show even began. You'll probably address this, but I missed it. How transformative is the Democratic $3.5 trillion social infrastructure bill going to be? I hope both bills fail. So do I. It's quite transformative. Not primarily in sheer spending, because we're talking about this being over 10 years, $350 billion a year for 10 years, if they're right in their estimate. But how often are they wrong? Almost always. Almost always. So that's the best case scenario. It's $350 billion a year for the next 10 years. But what it does, and I don't have all the details here. I'll do a show on this if it passes or if it gets close to passing. What they do is they either enhance, expand, or add new social programs. And we know that once social programs get added, they only grow. Once they get enhanced, i.e. giving out more money, they only grow from there. So, and all of these social programs that they're introducing are not to help the poor. This is the genius of the Democrats, is they're not interested in helping the poor. They're interested in making the middle class dependent on government. And of course, the middle class is the majority, and therefore you'll never take it away. Notice, Social Security is not intended to help the poor. It's intended to, quote, help. It doesn't. It actually hurts, but it's intended to help the middle class. Medicare is primarily a middle class benefit. Everybody gets it. So you can never get rid of it. Never goes away. And that's the way they structure these bills. In ways that benefit everybody, or at least a majority of people. And therefore, it can never be taken away. It becomes an expectation. It becomes an entitlement. People are entitled to Social Security. They're entitled to Medicaid. Even at the Tea Party, take your hands off my Medicare was a big slogan. These are the limited government conservatives. So why do Democrats want it? Because they want power. They want power over our lives. And so do Republicans, but Democrats are much better at it. They get it. They understand what power requires. They understand how to manipulate people in order to achieve that power. And we buy into it because it's sold to us as help the poor, help people who can't help themselves. Like childcare, government-paid childcare. Well, won't even talk about the fact that that'll decrease the quality of childcare because government will be involved now. But it's a way to get us hooked on them. It's a way to, who's going to benefit from childcare? Everybody, including the middle class. So the middle class is not going to want it to ever go away. Right? So it's bad. It's bad because it introduces new programs. It's bad because it expands existing ones. And in that sense, it is the kind of program that just won't go away, that will keep expanding, keep growing, and it'll be with us forever. All right, let's see, more $20 questions. The real Mr. Meatball. I work in a chemical manufacturing. Very hard to imagine an algorithm continuously monitoring and continuously improving processes to stay competitive. Yes, it's hard to imagine, although an aspect of that, certain aspects of that will be done by machines, and you will elevate that portion of the work to the thing that only you as a human being can do, that the machine cannot. So it's hard to believe that machines can diagnose cancer faster than a doctor, better than a doctor, but they can't. Computers can do that. And certainly it would have been hard to imagine that 20, 30, 40 years ago, but they can't. So beware of saying you don't think it can happen. Okay, Michael asks, so far more technology has led to more jobs. I don't think that will always be the case. 1,000 years from now, I suspect automation will create so much wealth, work will be optional. We're already seeing this now. I don't think work is optional unless you're willing to steal money from some people and give it to others. Work isn't optional. You're still going to have to produce what you consume in some way or another. Now, it might require very little work. But again, what we consume will become more and more sophisticated, potentially more and more expensive. It won't just be food and lodging. So, no, I don't think we will get to a point where there are no jobs. The nature of the jobs will change completely. The jobs will become primarily mental jobs. But I don't know what's going to happen in 1,000 years. 1,000 years is way too long of a time period for me to speculate about. And we're not seeing, there's a sense in which there are more jobs today, but there's also a sense in which there are more jobs and there are more people working. Many, many, many more people working. There are 8 billion people on the planet right now working. 200 years ago, there were 500 million. So it's almost 20x, right? Number of people. And they're all working. So it's not the case that as technology advances, it destroys jobs or it reduces the amount of work that's done. It increases the amount of work that's done. Now, one of the advantages having a lot of people working and having great technology is each individual can work less. and we can choose to work less. Dave asks, how should you evaluate a romantic partner where 50% of the time you have an amazing connection in chemistry, and the other 50% of the time she's nuts? It's hard for me to walk away from the good half. Yeah, 50% is not bad. Well, it really depends on what you mean by she's nuts. How nutty is nuts? And then you have to make the call of, is it going to become 90-10? Nuts? Is she getting better? Is she getting worse? To what extent can you tolerate the 50% nuts? Because 50% of the good sounds really, really good. It sounds like the good is really, really good. So it's hard to imagine walking away from that. It really, really, really depends on how good the good is and how bad the bad is. And what you think the cause of the nuttiness is. Is she sick? Is the sickness going to get worse? Is she psychologically damaged? Can she get better? Right, so it's all of those factors have to go into it. Right? And what kind of relationship this is? Is this a relationship forever? You better get to know in greater depth the cause of the nuttiness before you get married. All right. Whoops, what happened? Yeah. There seems to be in some a desire to work that overpowers bad cultural ideas. I don't think anything could have stopped Steve Jobs from making work his life's motive. Any thoughts on what makes such people different? No, I think what makes them different is a focus on living. Choices that they made very young that connect them to reality, that focus them on achievement, that orient them towards reality, not towards exclusively towards their emotions, and where they also have real self-esteem because of things that they've done in their childhood and conclusions they've come to about the world and about themselves from those things that they have done. So remember that these things are not caused by external factors. They are caused by the choices you make. You're not born that way. You're not made that way by your parents. You are shaped by the choices that you make. And some people make the kind of choices, the primary choice, to think, to stay focused on reality, to orient themselves towards reality and truth and success and adventure. They don't want Garden of Eden. They wouldn't think of Garden of Eden as an ideal. They want an adventure. They want excitement. They want thrills in their life. And work is the best way to get it. Productive work, exciting productive work, challenging productive work is the best way to get it. All right, I wanted to give you a little bit of good news, and then I'll go back to the Super Chat questions. I will note that we're probably, I don't know, I haven't kept track. I don't know if anybody out there has been keeping track of the amount of money coming in. We're probably about halfway to our goal in terms of raising money. And I'm not going to bug you about it as we're going through, as I'm talking. So I'll just remind you now in between topics. Please use the Super Chat to support the show. If you want to support the show on a monthly basis, which is my preferred methodology, the best way for you to do it if you're not here live is to do it on Patreon or Subscribestar. Just go patreon.com/YaronBrook Show. Same thing with Subscribestar.com. Or you could go directly to my website, yaronbrookshow.com/support, yaronbrookshow.com/support, and make your contribution there. That's PayPal. Or you can use locals, or you can use Venmo. You can go to Yaron Brook Show and make a Venmo contribution. So there are lots of ways to do that. I like the steady monthly contributions. It makes it possible for me to plan. All right, so, but of course, Super Chat is open, and we're still looking for $200 to $300 on the Super Chat, so go for it, guys. I want to talk about this survey that was done. It's a survey that's done, it's called the American Dream 2021 Snapshot. The results were just published recently. And it was, it's put out by the Archbridge Institute. No idea who the Archbridge Institute is. Don't know. My guess is it's a conservative think tank institute, but it's hard to tell. I'm trying to figure out who they are, but it's not clear to me who they are. So they have a bunch of different questions that they ask people about inequality, about opportunities, and I thought the answers were really interesting. So, you know what? Let's do this. I'm going to try to do this. Yeah. Okay. All right. Can you guys see that? Is it big enough? Big enough on your screens to see that? All right. That way you can walk along with me as I go through this. Let's just enlarge this so we can see it a little better. There we go. All right. So which of the following do you consider to be the most important goal of public policy? So closing the gap between rich and poor. About 24% of people said that. That's a lot. Notice that it skews dramatically towards the young. 18 to 29 is 28%. 30 to 44 is 31%. As you go older, it's 20% among 45 to 60 plus. Right? So closing the gap between rich and poor, young people think that's an important goal, or the most important goal. Older people do not. What about levels of education? Well, the more educated they are, the more you think that's the goal of public policy. The more educated you are, the more you think that's the goal of public policy. I think that's quite interesting. They also divided by race. There are not a lot of differences. 23 white, 27 black, 24 Hispanic. A little bit more on the minority side, but not a lot. 1 percentage point with regard. It's the other, whatever the hell the other is, that are really about closing the bank. They score 31%, right? 31%. You can also look at this in income. So let's see. How do I? I guess you have to income. You have to go to the next page. We'll do income in a minute. Let's do this other stuff first. This thing is bouncing around for me. All right. There we go. Ensuring everyone has a fair chance of achieving success. Now here, of course, it depends what you mean by fair chance. But let's assume that fair chance means there are no barriers. There's no racism or government-sponsored racism. There's no, everybody's equal before the law. So what we would consider as kind of what the government should be doing. Well, here 41% think this is the goal. And of course, this one skews dramatically towards older people. Dramatically towards older people. Here, education matters less. This is really driven by age. So the older you are, the more likely it is that you want a fair chance of achieving success. But still, 31% of all young people think that that's the primary goal of public policy. If you look by race, again, not a lot of differences by race. Not a lot of differences. Third goal of public policy, most important goal of public policy, Ensuring Americans do not live in poverty. Here is also driven dramatically by age. Just flip. The younger you are, the more inclined you will be with this. So young people tend to care about poverty and gap, inequality. Older people seem to care about opportunity, rule of law. And then there's none of the above, which is probably what I would have said, right? But that's only 9%, and again, skews young to old. So young people overwhelmingly take on the position of nobody lives in poverty, we close the gap. I am happy to think goal of public policy. I don't think it's a goal of public policy at all, but I don't want people living in poverty. But closing the gap between rich and poor is not important. And it's good to see the significant number of Americans agree with that. All right, let's see. I don't know. Oh, here the income. Not a lot of differences across income. On all the questions. It's not a question of income. It's not a question of class. Your opinion on this issue is, your opinion on this issue is all about age. Go back, I can't do it that way. Sorry, guys. Go back to here. It's all about age. It's all about younger you are, the more you care about the poor. The more you care about the gap between rich and poor. The older you are, the less you care about that. That's kind of the reality of America we live in today. All right, let's go down and look at this technology sucks. Okay, there we have it. You have it there in your picture. All right, so here, what does equality mean to you? This is interesting. What does equality mean to you? Everyone ends up in the same place. Communism, egalitarianism. Only 4% of Americans believe that's what equality. They're the ones who say equality is important, but that's what they think equality means. Only 4%. Now that is good news. Really good news. Now young people, it's 6%, but 30 to 44-year-olds, it's only 2%. So equal outcome is not a goal of any of these people. When there is equality before the law and people have a fair chance to pursue opportunities regardless of where they started, that's what equality means to them. 66% of Americans stand by this. Again, young people only 60%, old people 72%, but they all, a majority of Americans think it's about equality before the law. The more educated you are, the more you believe this. But young people generally believe this. No high school degree and BA plus generally believe this, all in the 60s and 70%. Racially, again, blacks and Hispanics lower, but not by a massive amount, and it's still a majority of them think that this is what equality means. Now, this is really good news. Well, income, yeah, the wealthy you are, the more the rule of law is what matters to you. The poorer, the less what it matters to you. But generally, again, it's a majority in every one of those income categories. Everyone starts in the same position. That's what equality means to them. It's kind of the equality of opportunity. 13% of young people, 9%, 7% of older people. Again, not big numbers, are going to, the communism or the semi-communism kind of view, the egalitarian view. Egalitarianism in this survey is not popular among anybody. Again, I think good news. Where people who start with more, right? where people who start with more disadvantages are given tools that could help them catch up with others. All right, this is state intervention, this is the welfare state, but not to achieve equality. Give them tools. 11%, 13, 14% of young people. This actually is quite encouraging. Egalitarianism is not that popular with anybody out there. So, you know, the educated seem to have the most affinity towards redistribution, but not towards equality of outcome, not towards kind of an egalitarianism. Right? Let's see if there's anything else interesting here. What is the best way for an individual? Oh, this is interesting. What is the best way for an individual to climb the income ladder? A job. 50% of Americans think it's a job. That's a good answer. All right, well-designed government assistance programs, the welfare state, only 8%. A college degree, okay, education, 16%. High degree of family and social support, 15%. So what is the best way for an individual to climb the income ladder? It's work, education, and family support. The amount of people who believe that the government's job is to do this is 8%, less than 10%. Again, that's good news. Ajav says, no, not Ajav. Edward asks, what about marrying someone rich? Wasn't provided as an option. What is the most important precondition in enabling people to climb the income ladder? Strong labor market and high level of economic growth. 34%. I wish it was 90, but that's great. Krish, thank you. That is incredibly generous. Wow, 300 Australian dollars. Thank you, Krish. 34%. Yes, only 27% of young people, 40% of old, but still 34% of Americans still believe that it's strong labor markets and high level of economic growth. Low levels of inequality are preconditioned to enable people to climb the income ladder. Only 6%. Stable family structure. Okay, not completely nuts. 17%. Strong government social safety net. Look at this. What is the most important precondition in enabling people to climb the income ladder? If I'd asked you how you think Americans would score strong government social safety net, how many of you would have said 5%? Very few. That's good. That's good news. Increased access to higher education, 24%. Okay. I don't think that's right, but not bad. Again, not a government program necessarily. All right, let's see if there's anything else. All right, that's conclusions. All right, we're done. So I come away from this, you know, pretty good, pretty positive, pretty positive. No, thank you. No, thank you. 50 Canadian dollars. Thank you. We must be close to 600 now. I think so. I think we're probably, I don't know, 50 to 100 bucks away. But I think we're pretty close. So I come away pretty positive. Americans seem to think, a majority of Americans think that equality refers to equality before the law. Equality of, you know, of rights, of liberty. At least to some extent. They're not clear exactly. The definitions are not super clear. Right? Americans seem to think that the way to progress is by getting a job. And the way to have a higher income job is by having an economy that is productive, that is growing, that produces jobs. Yeah. Yes, too many Americans still believe that that the main job of government is to eradicate poverty. Too many Americans still believe that this job of government is to reduce inequality, but not as many people as I would have expected. So I come away from this poll far more positive about the American people than I imagined, that I thought. I'm a little relieved by reading it because things look pretty bleak out there. Maybe things are not as bad as we all thought they were. Maybe. Hard to tell. All right. Let's go back to the Super Chat question. We're gonna start with Zhao. I think Zhao is the way you say it. Have you read any work by Nathaniel Branden? Yes, I have. Did you meet him in person? What do you think of him? I met him in person once at a party. Unexpectedly. I turned around and there he was. I didn't really recognize him first. He was old and he had obviously suffered a stroke and he could barely speak. But it was obvious that it was him after a couple of minutes. And he wanted to chat. He wanted to talk to me. I basically told him that I had no interest in having any conversation with him. That I had no interest in, he wanted to meet for coffee. I said no. And he said something like, don't be afraid of Leonard Peikoff. It's okay. You can have coffee with me. I won't tell anybody. I said, I'm not afraid of Leonard Peikoff. I don't want to have coffee with you. For those of you who don't know, Nathaniel Branden was Ayn Rand's student, partner, both business and for some period romantically involved. And he's somebody who betrayed her, stabbed her in the back, and then went on to betray Objectivism, the philosophy of Ayn Rand, and stabbed it, if you will, in the back. So I have no respect for Nathaniel Branden. Zero. Zilch. You attack a hero of mine, you're dead. You're finished. You're not dead. I can't kill you, but you're finished with regard to having a relationship with me. I have no interest in you. So I had no interest in meeting Nathaniel. It was foisted on me unexpectedly, and did Nathaniel Branden do good work? Sure, absolutely. Doesn't mean you have to like the guy. Doesn't mean you have to associate with the guy. It doesn't mean you give him any particular anything, time of day. He's immoral. He betrayed both Ayn Rand and betrayed the philosophy. Oh, there's so many quotes of him betraying the philosophy. So many times. I listened to lectures of his where he became mystical. He became, bizarre, weird, anti-reason. He became very anti-objectivist. Very anti-objectivist. And he does not understand objectivism better than I do because he didn't understand objectivism. He faked objectivism from day one. He was a faker of the philosophy. That was his genius, to be able to fake a philosophy of life in order to sustain a relationship with Ayn Rand, in order for Ayn Rand to continue to like him. A second-hander, just not a good guy. Not a good guy. Now, yeah, he did a lot of good work, particularly when he was with Ayn Rand. But after he left her, he did seances, all kinds of weird stuff. He became a mystic. So, yeah. Don't believe me? Read his book. Read his book, his autobiography about his relationship with Ayn Rand, and you can see what a scumbag he turned out to be. Sorry. That's what he was. All right, let's see. I mean, in his own words, he told the story, and you could see what a lying cheat he was. And a manipulator. And in spite of his, his talks on objectivism were amazing because Ayn Rand was right there and helped him. He did a lot of very, very important work. The essays that he wrote, he was super smart, off the chart smart. Doesn't mean he was an objectivist. Doesn't mean he was moral. Doesn't mean he was a good person. He was super smart. And there were periods where he must have had a deep understanding of objectivism. He just never integrated it into his life. He never lived it. And I don't care how much you know, it's whether you live it that matters. And that's the point. The point is that people want to know objectivism, but that's not what's important. What's important is to live it. I'll take my life over his any day, in that sense. All right, we got a bunch of $5 and $10 questions we're going to take now. Dave, just curious, what scenes made you emotional cry in Saving Private Ryan? Oh, at the graveyard at the end and at the beginning, because it was so obvious. When he kind of salutes him, when the hero dies, when the mother gets, when the car. See, some of this I took personally, because when the car comes and they are coming to tell the mother that her 3 sons are dead, I remember as a 12-year-old sitting at the window, watching cars come, soldiers with flowers coming out, and thinking, okay, which door are they going to knock on? Which condo building which apartment building are they going to? Whose son has just died in our neighborhood? And this happened on several occasions. Could have been my dad. I didn't know. You don't know until they knock on your door, right? But watching that, so maybe part of the emotion of that particular scene was remembering, experiencing the dread of watching them. Right. This was in Israel, yes. All right. Michael asked, do you think it's difficult for ambitious people to comprehend how so many people just want to get by and not strive to live the good life? Yes. I definitely think it's difficult for ambitious people to comprehend. It's difficult generally to comprehend other people's irrationality. But these fundamental issues of ambition or lack of it, those are it's very, very hard to comprehend why people make that choice not to focus, not to drive, not to want to live when they've got this amazing opportunity. James asks, why do some states have no income tax? How does it benefit citizens of that state? Since taxation is theft, why are no income tax states undervalued? I don't understand. So a number of states have no income tax. You listed them earlier. Colorado, the governor of Colorado, who's a Democrat, is actually a fan of a zero income tax. Look, it's some people get it. If you tax income, you're taxing work. If you're taxing value production, value creation. What you tax, you get less of. What you tax, you get less of. So some states have recognized that taxing work is counterproductive even for their status goals. They'd rather tax other things and create work to benefit, quote, society, to benefit the collective. And then you can increase other taxes, right? So for example, Sinema, the senator from Arizona, and she doesn't want to increase income taxes. She doesn't think income tax is a good idea. What does she want? She wants a carbon tax. She wants to tax carbon, which I think is in some respects, a better tax than an income tax. But here the motivation is you tax it, you get less of it. But also you're taxing consumption, you're not taxing work, you're not taxing value creation. I'm not sure what you mean by why no income tax states are undervalued. I don't think they are. I don't think there are. A lot of people are moving to no income tax states. Right? James asks, why do so many Jewish people flirt with the idea of communism? This goes for secular and non-secular Jews. Will this ever change? I don't think that's particularly true. I mean, Jewish people flirt with intellectual ideas, right? Jews are disproportionately represented among objectivists. Jews are disproportionately represented among neoconservatives. Jews are disproportionately represented among nationalist conservatives. Indeed, one of the leaders of that movement, Yoram Hazony, is an Israeli Jew, and a conservative one at that. Look at Ben Shapiro. Jews are overly represented in among libertarians, maybe, I don't know, but certainly Mises was Jewish, for example. Milton Friedman was Jewish, but also among university professors, intellectuals, way overrepresented, and among socialists and communists, because those are the ideas that the university professors typically have. So Jews are just generally overrepresented among intellectuals, and intellectuals are the ones that are attracted to communism. And it has to do with a culture of learning, a culture of the book, a culture of reading, a culture of debate, a culture of discussion. And therefore they read what the intellectuals write. Since most intellectuals are left, they become leftists. They also, because they're intellectuals, they're detached from reality. They don't realize what, for example, production actually necessitates. They can come up with fantasies like fully automated luxury communism. Right? So, yes. Yes, it's they're overly represented in all those areas. Because, I think, of their orientation towards the intellectual. Michael Sanders says, states with no income tax tend to be uneducated or uninteresting. I don't know. Austin, Texas is interesting. Miami is interesting. Nashville is interesting. Seattle is interesting. So I don't know that that's the case. Despite the crushing socialist policies of New York and California, that is where most of the high-quality people are located. True, although it is changing to some extent. People are leaving California and New York, have been for decades, but that continues and to some extent is accelerated. How come Kant, Hegel, and Hitler never quoted Plato? Is that true? They never quoted Plato? I don't know. Kant was a system builder. He kind of built, in a sense, from scratch. But it doesn't matter who you quote. Most Kantians don't quote Kant because they get their Kant from the culture. They get their Kant from other philosophers who were intermediary. They're influenced by him, whether they know it's him or not. And I think certainly that's the case of Plato. Everybody's influenced by Plato, even the good philosophers. Doesn't mean they're going to quote him, but I don't know why. I mean, I understand why Hitler wouldn't quote Kant, but wouldn't quote Plato. But it's not, your influences are not the people you quote. The influences are the people who laid out the ideas that you take seriously. James, if resources became scarce, the amount of private land that you bought is important. I'm thinking of all things that impact long-term growth. The amount of private land that can be bought is important. I don't know what resources are scarce, right? Under what market conditions are you asking the question? You're going to have to ask it again with more detail in terms of what actually you're trying to get at, because I'm not sure I understand what you're getting at. Michael asks, do you think most people are implicit altruists and explicit egoists or vice versa? I think most people are, well, I think they're both implicit and they're both explicit. It depends what you mean by implicit and explicit. But people are implicitly both pursuing their self-interest and feel guilty about it, which is the altruism. They know they shouldn't be pursuing their self-interest. And to some extent, they hold that explicitly, but certainly implicitly, they're both. Mostly, and held as the primary is altruism, because self-interest is viewed as the anti-morality. Egoism is viewed as bad. So to be moral is to be altruistic. That everybody holds, both explicitly and implicitly. Bree, I discussed government with Louis Rossman, 1.6 million subscribers last night. I told him to check you out. He said he saw you on San Cedar and you seemed unprepared. Just wanted you to see outside the bubble. Fine, not sure what preparing for Sam Cedar means, right? Given that I didn't get the list of questions in advance. But thanks for the feedback, Bree. Dean says, thank you. You gave me a lot of value in the last 3 years. I appreciate that. By the way, the Sam Cedar thing was not in the bubble. I mean, the comments were pretty brutal. I think I read you some of them afterwards, so I know the impact that it had. It also increased my subscribers by, not an insignificant amount, so I'll take it. All right. Let's see. All right, thanks everybody. I think we'll call in a night. We run out of the Super Chat questions, so that's good. I think we made our targets thanks to some general contributions from Krish and a bunch of others, so I really appreciate that. I will be back on tomorrow at 8 p.m. We'll be doing Your Own Rules for Life. We'll do Your Own Rules for Life. What are they going to be tomorrow? I think it's health, wealth, and pleasure. Health, wealth, and pleasure, right? All right, guys, I appreciate it, and I will, I'll see you all tomorrow.